This is Weekend Edition. I'm Liane Hansen. When Granada Television first asked Jeremy Brett to play Sherlock Holmes, the British actor was not particularly enthused.
I remember I drove away from the dinner when I was asked, and I went with my son David. And he said, "Dad, you don't want to do it, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't. I really don't want to do it. I think it's been done. I think it's been done so many times. I just think it's an old chestnut. I can't see any point in trying to do it anymore."
Jeremy Brett did not think he had the stuff to play Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's famous detective. At the time, he was a romantic lead in Shakespeare and wooed Audrey Hepburn as Freddie in the film My Fair Lady. Besides, Sherlock Holmes had been portrayed by some of the finest actors of the century: William Gillette, Ellie Norwood, Arthur Wantner, and of course, Basil Rathbone. Intimidating competition. But Jeremy Brett eventually changed his mind and is now doing his sixth series as Holmes. The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes premiered this week on PBS stations across the country as part of the Mystery Series. What prompted the change was Brett's rereading of the entire canon, the 54 short stories and 4 novels written by Doyle about Sherlock Holmes.
Well, I discovered all sorts of things that I could do if I had had the opportunity to do it. So I said yes, with enormous timidity and a certain amount of fear and an element of excitement. We approached the scripts. I said, "But you've asked me to do Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. These aren't Sherlock Holmes Doyle stories. The adapter's gone so far away." And the script editor said, "Jeremy, you're here to act. Just get on with it." And I tipped the table over and my Dover soul landed in his lap. And that was the beginning of the tussle. I used to take the whole canon with me to every beginning of each film and fight for Doyle. After about a year and a half, I said, "Listen, if you don't start taking care of me, I may lose interest," because it was such a tussle. But then Granada Studios stepped in and was so remarkable and wonderful and gave me 2 weeks rehearsal instead of the 1. So the first week I could fight for Doyle, and the second week I could work with my fellow actors. And that's basically how it's been ever since.
One of the things that you seem to do that other actors that have portrayed the role have not is play up the less than pleasant aspects of his character. Even with Basil Rathbone, you had the feeling that there was...
Well, Basil Rathbone, first and foremost, is my Sherlock Holmes.
He is?
Yes, because he was the person I first saw, and I can't see me, of course. So he is my Sherlock Holmes.
But do you try to do what he does, or try to avoid what he does in order to make it your own? You do want to make it your own.
Well, we are... A few of us in England, we are what we call becomers. In other words, you become the person you're playing, rather like Stanislavski. Not the method, because the method's slightly different, but you become the creature, the person you're playing. In other words, if I'm a sponge, you squeeze the liquid of yourself out and draw in the liquid of the creature of the person you're playing. And so I had to try and give birth to him. I made terrible mistakes. I'm so miscast. I'm a romantic, heroic actor. So I was terribly aware that I had to hide an awful lot of me. And in so doing, I think I look quite often brusque, or maybe sometimes even slightly rude. In fact, Dame Jean Conan Doyle, Doyle's daughter, who was a great personal friend of mine, did once say to me, "I don't think my father meant you-know-who to be quite so rude." And I said, "I'm terribly sorry, Dame Jean, I'm just trying to hide me." She did say a lovely thing to me when I did the play in 1988, which was really to celebrate you-know-who's birthday, who was meant, he was 100, ha-ha. For the man who never existed, it's extraordinary to celebrate a birthday. And she did come to the play, and she did write me a sweet letter in which she said, "You are the Holmes of my childhood." And that, for me, is the ultimate accolade.
He is described as an emotionally cold character, but I think one of the hallmarks of your performance is that you bring a passion to the role. It's not an overt passion, but it's a passion that comes, for example, when you gloat, or you know who gloats when he's defeated an opponent, or a temper that flares when people are not listening to you or don't understand what it is that you're saying. There's this passion underneath this brusqueness and this rudeness, which is what I think makes him real, which is why your portrayal has been so...
Well, what I had to do, I mean, I was talking about becoming. What I mean by that is an inner life. Watson describes, who was a mind without a heart. That's hard to play, hard to become. So what I did was to invent an inner life. I mean, I know what his nanny looked like, for example. She was covered in starch. She probably scrubbed him, but never kissed him. I don't think he probably saw his mother till he was about 8. Maybe he caught a touch of the fragrance of her scent and the rustle of her dress. I guess college days were fairly complicated because he was quite isolated. He probably saw a girl across the quadrangle and fell in love. But she never looked at him. So he closed that door. And he became a brilliant fencer, of course, as we know, and a master of boxing. Brilliant athlete. And many more tiny little details which you have to kind of make up to fill this kind of well of that Doyle so brilliantly left out, because he built this extraordinary edifice. And if you're going to try, of course, it's much better read. That's the truth. Doyle's works are better read. If you're going to be rash enough to try and bring him into life by the visual arts, he's even better on radio. I'd rather listen to him than see him. Seeing is limiting,
You do develop a body language for him, though. I mean, whenever he thinks, he makes a pyramid with his fingers, and he puts them up in front of his face. And he has eccentric, rather, gestures of the hand.
It's all Doyle.
It's all Doyle.
All Doyle. You see, I couldn't believe it. It's all there. He says there's one moment which really threw me. He says, Holmes wriggles in his seat and roars with laughter. You see, I'd never even thought of Holmes laughing. So I had to go on an extraordinary journey of discovery, and it's all there in Doyle. And what is so extraordinary to me is that no one's done Doyle before, and I find that bewildering.
In the course of producing these series and acting in these series, was it difficult for you to change Watson's midstream?
Well, it was devastating. My darling David Burke came to me and said, I must go home. My son, Tom, is 2, and I must be with him growing up. And I said, of course, I absolutely understand. And so he went back to Anna, his sweet wife, and little Tom. And I stood and waved goodbye at the station in Manchester, which is where the studios are located in England. And thought, now what do? I've lost to Watson, my bestest friend. And, I mean me, one of my best friends, David Burke. And it was Anna, his wife, who said, there's a man with a cast of eye rather like yours, David. And Edward arrived, of course, who I'd worked with at the National Theatre. He's the Cedric Hardwicke's son, by the by.
But for you playing with Edward Hardwicke, did you have to develop a new relationship, or was he able to then take on the cloak of Watson enough so that you're Sherlock?
Well, Edward's a very, very remarkable man. Probably one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And he wanted to fit in. So he watched the previous 13 films, decided to try and look a little like David Burke as much as he could, bless him. So he put on a toupee, and put lifts in his heels. And the first film we shot together was The Abbey Grange, and we were running across a field. And these heels were too high, so he was slipping and sliding. And I said, oh, Edward, take them out. I'll bend my knees for the rest of the film. So that's how we adapted and heeled it in.
Oh. You had a personal tragedy between seasons. Your wife died.
Joni,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, well, Joni, well, the reason I did Aren't We All was to be with her.